Welcome to Class 3 of English 101. We'll continue this week with our study of pronouns. We began our study of pronouns last week, and let's do just a quick review. We learned last week that a pronoun is a word that takes the place of a noun. We also learned that there is a word in the sentence that the pronoun stands for, and that word is called the pronoun's antecedent. Now, the antecedent may not always be in the same sentence. The antecedent may be in a previous sentence, but it's clear that that pronoun is referring to the antecedent. Last week we considered personal pronouns. Personal pronouns have person, first person, second person, and third person. First person is the speaker, second person is the person spoken to, and third person is the person spoken about. We also learned that personal pronouns have case. The three cases are nominative, which is the subject case, I, you, he, she, it, we, they. Then we have the objective case used as direct object, indirect object, and object of the preposition. These are me, you, him, her, it, us, they. And then we also learned that there's the possessive case, which shows ownership. My, mine, your, yours, his, her, hers, its, our, ours, their, and theirs. Today we want to turn our attention to the other 7 classifications of pronouns. Let's begin by thinking about relative pronouns. Relative pronouns relate one part of the sentence to another part of the sentence. Relative pronouns are which, that, whom, whatever, whomever, who, what. And there are rules that go along with relative pronouns. Number 1, use who if the pronoun is the subject of a verb. Use whom if the pronoun is the object of a verb, preposition, or infinitive. Rule number 2, who and whom are generally used to refer to people. Number 3, that can refer to people, animals, and things. And rule number 4, what generally does not refer to people. Now let's go back to rule number 1, because it's one that is very easily mistaken and used improperly. Who is the pronoun to be used if it is the subject of a verb. Who went to the store? Use whom if the pronoun is the object of a verb, preposition, or infinitive. You went to the store with whom? Who went to the store? You went to the store with whom? Or with whom did you go to the store? So please use who and whom correctly. Who is the subjective use of the pronoun. Whom is the objective use of the pronoun. Interrogative pronouns. Interrogative pronouns are used to ask a question. Who, whose, whom, which, what. Which mountain has the highest peak? Which mountain? The pronoun is speaking of mountains, but it's asking the question, which mountain? Who is going with you? Now we could reverse that and say, you are going with whom? Whom would be the object of the preposition with. But in the sentence as we have it here, who is going with you? Who is actually the subject of this sentence? Who is going with you? What were you planning to do tonight? What is the interrogative pronoun? What were you planning to do tonight? So interrogative pronouns are pronouns that are used to ask a question. Demonstrative pronouns. Demonstrative pronouns are also called pointing pronouns, and they're used to identify which thing you're actually talking about. These pronouns are that, these, this, and those. This is her jacket. That is your jacket. I went to see all these movies. Now, a pointing pronoun has to take the place of a noun, or else it would be an adjective. So please remember that. A pointing pronoun must take the place of a noun, or it would be an adjective in the sentence. That jacket. That purse. That hat. This movie. Those are all adjectives describing, modifying the noun in the sentence. But as we have these are demonstrative pronouns describing, demonstrating which thing you're talking about. This is her jacket. You're referring to a specific thing. That is your jacket. So please remember the distinction between the pronoun, the demonstrative pronoun, and also how it can be used in a sentence as an adjective and not a pronoun. Let's give our attention now to reflexive or intensive pronouns. A reflexive pronoun, sometimes referred to as a mirror pronoun, is a noun that reflects the noun they stand for, or they intensify the noun they stand for. All of these pronouns, reflexive or intensive pronouns, will end with either self or selves. Myself, yourself, himself, herself. Ourselves, yourselves, themselves, itself. Now think about these two sentences. She hit herself with a hammer. The pronoun herself reflects back to she, so it mirrors she. She hit herself with the hammer. I myself was left bleeding on the sidewalk. Myself intensifies I. So it's two different pronouns. She is a pronoun. Hit herself is another pronoun. I is a pronoun. Myself is a pronoun. But in these two sentences, herself reflects back onto she, mirrors the pronoun she, and myself reflects back or mirrors the pronoun I. Reflexive pronouns, again, as we go on thinking about them, these pronouns are not reflexive pronouns in these following sentences because the underlined words are not the same persons or things. Now pay attention carefully to these sentences and compare the sentences with me. First of all, let's consider the sentences on the left side of the screen. John saw me. Why does he blame you? David sent him a copy. My dog hurt the cat. We blame you. Now, go back to the first sentence. John saw me. This is not a reflexive pronoun because me does not mirror John. But now look at the sentence to the right. John saw himself in the mirror. Himself refers back to John, identifies John. In the first sentence, John saw me. It's not a reflexive or mirror pronoun because it's not mirroring John. But in the second sentence, John saw himself in the mirror. It is a reflexive pronoun because it is mirroring back on John. Why does he blame you? Two different persons. Why do you blame yourself? Yourself reflects back onto you. It mirrors the word you. David sent him a copy, or David sent himself a copy. David sending someone else a copy is not reflexive, but David sending himself a copy is reflexive. My dog hurt the cat is not reflexive because cat is not identified with dog. My dog hurt itself is reflexive because itself refers back to dog. We blame you is not reflexive because you is not identified with we. We blame ourselves is reflexive because ourselves reflects back or mirrors the pronoun we. Now, going on with intensive pronouns, and reflexive and intensive are the same thing, but they're used in a little bit of a different way. Intensive pronouns are the same pronouns as mirror pronouns, but they function differently. Intensive pronouns actually intensify the antecedent. Again, they end with self or selves, and they're the same ones as we saw with the mirror pronouns, myself, yourself, himself, herself, ourselves, yourselves, themselves, itself. But think about these, the intensive pronouns in contrast to the mirror pronouns. I went there myself, or it could be worded, I myself went there. So it intensifies. I went there myself. Have they themselves seen the movie? Or have they seen it themselves? He drove to the store himself, or he himself drove to the store. So these intensify the pronoun, whereas in the previous screen we saw mirror pronouns, reflexive pronouns that just reflect back on itself or mirror itself. These go farther than just mirroring, but actually intensify, add an intensification to the pronoun. I went there myself. There's an intensification. Have they themselves seen the movie? So it is the same pronoun, and it is sort of in the same vein as mirror or reflexive, but it adds an intensification to the pronoun itself. Let's give our attention now to reciprocal pronouns. Reciprocal pronouns are used when each of two or more subjects is acting in the same way towards the other. Now, look down at the bottom of the screen before we look at the examples. There are rules that have to be followed with reciprocal pronouns. Rule number one, there must be two or more people, things, or groups involved. And rule number two, they must be doing the same thing. Now, look at the two examples. Anne is talking to John. John is talking to Anne. The second sentence shows how we can use reciprocal pronouns. Anne and John are talking to each other. When we think of reciprocal pronouns, We need to understand that there are only two of them, and they both consist of two words, each other and one another. Anne and John are talking to each other. Anne and John are talking to one another. Either one of those is correct. Indefinite pronouns. Indefinite pronouns point out indefinite persons or things and don't usually have antecedents. Now look at this list. This is a sampling, but look at the list that we have here of indefinite pronouns. All, any, anybody, anything, both, each, either, enough, everybody, everything, few, less, many, more, much, neither, none, nothing, one, plenty, several, some, and again I have the word several, misprinted that. But indefinite pronouns are vague. They don't stand in for specific nouns. So they're indefinite. They point out indefinite persons or things and don't usually have antecedents in the sentence. So let's consider some rules for the proper use of indefinite pronouns. Rule number 1, each, either, neither, one, everyone, everybody, no one, nobody, anybody, anyone, anything, someone, somebody, and something are singular. So we use a singular verb and a singular pronoun to match. Now sometimes these can become rather difficult to remember because sometimes if we're thinking of everyone, we think of it as plural, but it's not. It's everyone, everybody, no one, neither. So we're thinking of one, which means it's singular, but we're using a word that sounds plural. So these words are singular, and you would use a singular verb and a singular pronoun. Rule number 2, both, several, few, many, and plenty always refer to more than one thing, so they're always plural. Therefore, we match them with plural verbs and plural personal pronouns. Both of us went to the store. Several of us are going. Go back to rule number 1. Neither of us is. Rule number 2. Some of us are. We just have to remember the rule because sometimes it doesn't sound correct when we say the sentence. But we need to understand the ones that are plural and the ones that are singular so we can match them with the correct verb. Rule number 3. All, most, some, any, and none can be either singular or plural. So, if it's not confusing enough to realize that some of those in rules number 1 and 2 are very confusing to remember that those in number 1 are singular and have to have singular verbs, and those in number 2 are plural and have to have plural verbs. But now we've got some pronouns, indefinite pronouns, that can be either singular or plural. So how do you know the difference? Well, if you're talking about things that can be counted individually, say for instance coins, we treat that pronoun as plural. Coins, plural. none are on the floor. If we're talking about coins, there are no coins on the floor. So none are on the floor. But now let's think about the same word, none, in reference to sand. Even though sand can be counted by grain, it's impossible to count sand, so it's thought of as singular. So when we think of sand, none is on the floor. Look at that bottle of coins that have spilled, but none are on the floor. Look at that container of sand that is broken, but none is on the floor. None are, none is, according to whether it is countable or uncountable. Rule number 4. None is usually treated as plural unless you're using it in the sense of not one single thing or no one person. So, the rules that go along with indefinite pronouns can be rather tricky at times, and these are things in the English language that we just have to learn, because they're things that really don't make sense in and of themselves, as we see with these rules on indefinite pronouns, and yet there are proper and improper ways of using these personal pronouns, these indefinite pronouns. So we've spent 2 weeks now looking at pronouns, and pronouns serve a very, very important role in sentence structure, in sentence syntax, in proper grammar, whether writing or speaking. So that's the reason we've given so much time and attention to pronouns. And I hope you'll get the sentences written in a timely fashion, get those turned in to me so that I can grade them, get them back to you with any changes or any corrections that need to be made. And again, if you have any questions about this particular lesson on the pronouns, then please send me a note through Student Portal or by email, and I will again get back in touch with you just as quickly as I possibly can. God bless you. Have a great week, and we'll meet again next week for class number 4.